December 2nd, 1986, in Honolulu, at about 7 o'clock at night. And Mr. Mallon lives in Mountain View, California. And the interviewer was Bart Fredo, and also in the room is Dan Martinez of the National Park Service. Mr. Mallon, let me start off by asking you to tell us your name and where you were from back in 1941.
Charles W. Mallon, from Healdsburg, California.
What branch of the service were you in, and what was your rank?
I was in the Marine Corps, and I was a PFC at the time of the attack.
What was your job?
I was clerk for the first sergeant aboard ship.
And which ship was that?
The Oklahoma.
When were you assigned to the Oklahoma?
January 1941.
Take you back to the morning of the attack. Real early. What were you doing? This is before the attack.
Real early, I'd have to go look. I got up ready and went into the first sergeant's office, made up the morning report, which we have to of any prisoners, and then all our men are aboard and accounted for. Had him sign it, took it down to the first lieutenant's office. Then on the way back is when the first alarm was sounded. And I looked into the first sergeant's office and I told him they had sounded air attack. Seek, go third deck or below. And he was still lying in his bunk at that time. So he said, okay, go ahead. So I went down on the third deck of the ammunition conveyor belts. Was standing there about 2 minutes or 3 minutes when they sounded general quarters. And I left that part of the ship, come up through the hatch, stopped by the first sergeant's office again, said, top, they sounded general quarters. I'm going on the battle station. He said, go ahead. He was sitting on the edge of the bunk in his skivvies.
His underwear?
It's just his underwear. So I went on up. As I went out of the hatch, there was water splashing up onto the hardwick, you know, from different things, and I could hear machine gun firing. So I ducked under number 3 casemate turret to get out of the thing, then crawled over to the other side and went up into number 10 casemate, because we couldn't get up to our battle station due to the fact it was locked for security from the night before.
Are you above deck now?
I'm on the main deck now. So I go up in the number 10 casemate, and the mess tables are still up there. So 3 or 4 of us took those mess tables and threw them against the galley bulkhead, which would be towards the port side, so they wouldn't fall on anybody. And about the time the boatswain came by and said, you might as well give it up because we can't save the ship. And after he told us about 2 or 3 minutes, they said abandon ship. So we went down, got back on the main deck again and over the railing next to the Maryland. And one of the fellows started crossing the big lines between the Maryland and our ship, but the sailors aboard the Maryland took their axes and cut that so they Oklahoma wouldn't pull them against it because they wanted to be free, and he dropped about 10 feet into the water. So I went over the side and stood on the blister for a little while, then went on down into the water, and while I was in the water, the Arizona blew up.
You went into the water?
Yeah.
Voluntarily, or were you blown in?
No, I went in voluntarily because I was getting off of that Oklahoma because it was going over.
Prior to this happening, now, the time that you heard the first alarm, had you heard anything, gunfire, explosions, anything like that?
No, not while I was below deck. I hadn't heard a thing. Wasn't sure what was going on.
And when they sounded general quarters, had you heard anything at that point?
No, because I was way down on the third deck, down by the ammunition conveyor belts, so you can't hear anything way down there.
So when you came topside, what did you hear and see?
Well, I just heard the firing of shells and the water splashing up, and you could see, because the ship was starting to list pretty good by that time.
Could you feel it when it got hit?
No, I hadn't felt it because the armored deck, I think, kept it pretty steady, because I hadn't felt anything and I was trying to hold my composure too, not knowing what was really going on. I just went ahead and thought they were just having a maneuver until he got topside. But of course, when you saw the ship was listing, I figured, wasn't sure what was really going on. But
did you see any of the attacking planes?
No, I never saw one because I didn't get a chance to look around because we were trying to get to our battle station. I was unable to get there, so I went into the casemate to get rid of the tables and see what was going to do. And that's when the boats had told us we might as well leave.
How much time would you say passed from the time you came topside until the time you found yourself in the water, or you jumped in the water?
That was about 6 or 7 minutes, I guess. Then I was fully dressed except for a shirt. Most people take their shoes off when they go over the side, but I left mine on and went over the side.
When you were in the water, did you have an opportunity to look around to see what was happening?
Well, no, I was headed for the Maryland because I wanted to get on board the Maryland, and I grabbed a hold of the fender cane to start up over the side.
What's a fender cane? I'm sorry.
Well, that's a fender made of cane they put between the ships so when they won't rub or bump against each other and damage each other. And I started up over that. Somebody goes over my back, pushes me underwater. So I come up and get a hold and start again. Another time. That happened to me 5 times. So I had enough of that. So I went over and hung on to the bottom of the Oklahoma because it was well over by then. Finally, a motor whaleboat come by and picked me up, and I got aboard the Maryland then.
From that whaleboat?
Yeah, they took me over and helped me get aboard. 'Cause I was...
Were you injured in any way, wounded?
No, just got tired from being pushed underwater so many times.
When you got aboard the Maryland, which was inboard of the Oklahoma, tied up at Ford Island, what did you see then? What could you see from the Maryland?
Well, we saw a lot of smoke from the Arizona and the rest of the ship's on fire. And then our captain was there rounding us up.
The captain of your ship, the Oklahoma?
No, our Marine captain.
Oh.
He was there trying to round us up, and I run into the first sergeant with a blanket wrapped around him because he was still in his drawers because he didn't have a chance to get any clothes. I asked him what happened. He said, well, I was sitting there on the edge of the bunk when the water started coming to the porthole. I thought time to get out of there. So we stayed there and helped Maryland sailors on the anti-aircraft. We threw empty shells over the side so we could clear the decks. And then after it was over with, well, then we went to Ford Island. The captain moved us over to Ford Island.
When you were aboard the Maryland, did you see any of the attacking planes then?
No, I didn't see any at all. I wasn't looking for them very much.
What were you doing most of the time? Just helping move that ammunition?
Help them work with ammunition and getting rid of the empty casings from the 5-inch shells. Because if they're firing a lot, then you get a lot of shells and they get in the way. So we were clearing the decks for those.
Well, they presumably were firing at something, but you were too busy to look to see what they were firing at?
We were too busy to fire. Well, when you down below, we were on the main deck and weren't looking up all the time because one of the sergeants and I looked there when we heard some of the steam start escape. We were wondering whether we should dive over and go towards Ford Island then.
Could you ask him? He saw the Arizona explode.
Just ask him, yeah. Did you see the Arizona explode?
No, it exploded while I was in the water.
You heard it?
Oh, yeah, I heard it.
What did it?
Just a big boom, and you see smoke, and everything start curling up, and we didn't realize, I didn't realize it was Arizona then, because it was in the water, because the West Virginia was between where we were and where the Arizona, because we were ahead of the West Virginia, and the West Virginia had a lot of smoke coming out of it, too.
So it was difficult to see beyond the
Yeah.
West Virginia to the Arizona?
It was difficult to see, because they had because the West Virginia was here, we were here, and Arizona was in back of the Tennessee and the West Virginia, as far as we were concerned.
Once you were aboard the Maryland, could you look back and see the Arizona then? Or were your view still blocked?
We were still blocked because we had the Tennessee was there, and we really didn't know what really happened till, because you're going to go out and find out later. That's what.
What happened? You were on the Maryland. What happened next to you? Where did you go next, or did you stay there?
No, we went on Ford Island. They moved us over on Ford Island after the attacks subsided.
And by they, you mean the Marines from the Oklahoma?
Yeah, the whole detachment, what we could find at that time, because we tried to get a count, and I had to work with the first sergeant and then on, trying to find out, well, where was this man? Did you hear? One fellow said, yeah, we saw him dive off a turret, never didn't see him anymore. He's supposed to have been a first-class swimmer. So either he hit something when he went there or just went down, we don't. And then we asked, well, what happened to brig warden? Well, we lost our brig sentry, and he didn't make it out. They said he stopped to do something with the carpenter, and he didn't make it. The prisoners did, though.
Prisoners got out of the brig from the
Oh, yeah, he
Oklahoma.
released the prisoners as he should have at the sound of the alarm, and they came out on the side of the turret up through an air vent, and the ammunition loading, where they loaded the ammunition down to the bottom. And we asked one of the prisoners what happened, and he said, well, they last saw him in the carpenter shop, so that's, we know.
What kind of casualties did the Marine detachment from the Oklahoma take?
We lost 13, 12 enlisted and 1 officer.
Killed.
And, yeah, well, we lost him. The officer was lost in officer's country because the other lieutenant knew where he was, and they'd come back aboard together. And so that's where we knew where he was.
So you're on Ford Island now. What happened to you next?
Well, we just wandered around because we had no rifles, we had nothing. So we walked around to see if we could find something to do, and a Cadillac ambulance turned over on the side, so we only picked it up and put it back on its wheels. And then we picked up pieces of Arizona laying on Ford Island, because when the explosion, it blew parts all over. We found some of that over there.
You could see the Arizona at that point.
Oh, yeah,
then.
we could see it then. And
What was it?
You know, there was just a big blackened hulk and bent over, because the forward mast had just bent over the turret and the conning tower forward, because you know they had what, over 1 million pounds of explosion down there that blew it.
Throughout this time, from the time you first got above deck on the Oklahoma to the time you were on Ford Island, what was going through your mind? What were you thinking about?
I never put much thought to it. I was just doing something that I was supposed to be doing, trying to save myself too, and then get organized with the rest of the Marines.
Was it very confusing?
Well, it was confusing in a way, because nobody knew who was there and who, and especially our ship, because we didn't know what it was going to do. And then when we finally got off to Maryland on Ford Island in a group, we stayed there.
Did you know that it was the Japanese attacking you yourself?
Well, we'd heard it. You know, we'd heard it, because after a while, because we found out that someone might have saw, I would know, take some of the color guard who were raising the flag at 8 o'clock, the sergeant in charge of them wouldn't let them move until bullets started flying around them. Then he told them to disband. And they saw everything more, because they were up on the deck already. And let's see, one of our lieutenants came out to a porthole on the officer's side of the place. That's how he got out.
Oh, tell me about that now.
Well, I should have sent you that story, because I got all of both stories. When he wrote his story up, and if you might have read it, saw it in the Graham, this William G. Muller, well, it was there if you read that. Well, he came aboard, and he was in officer's country when it started, and finally he got trapped, and so the only way he could get out is come through the porthole in the officer's country, because they were large enough for a man to go through. And that's how he got out.
You got out through the porthole and into the water?
Yeah. And then he came aboard to Maryland too, and joined up with us.
And then eventually went to Ford Island with the rest of you?
The rest of us.
After you were on Ford Island, what was the rest of the day like? What did you do?
Well, we wandered around, tried to find something to do, try to find some arms, or do something. We had nothing to do. And so we just wandered around looking for something to do, kept going. Finally that night we went to sleep in the hangar. Then when those planes flew in, and all those anti-aircraft guns.
These are American planes flying in now.
They came in that night, opened up. So we just stayed in the hangars, because we were asleep in hangars. The only place for us.
What were the next few days like?
Well, the next day, we regrouped again and marched down towards the boathouse there on Ford Island. And in the meantime, we've had nothing to eat since Sunday morning, because there was nothing for us to eat there on the island, because they weren't. When we came around the shed and found these fellows, they had a little hash and toast, some coffee, and they gave us a little coffee and a slice of bread with some hash on it. That was our morning, the first meal we'd had since Sunday morning. Then we got the word, and they moved us to Marine barracks.
Where's that?
They're in they're in Pearl, you know.
Oh,
the
on
Marine-
shore.
Yeah, on shore, over at the Marine Barracks. So we're over there happy, thinking, well, this is great. We got a nice place. The next thing we get word, you're going back aboard the Maryland. So they moved us out at about midnight at night. We said, midnight at night? What's going on? Were these sailors up there with those Lewis guns? We're going out here in these motor launches? No, we were scared.
Afraid that the sailors would shoot at you.
Yeah, just make a mistake and fire on us. Because we were unarmed out there. We were out there, no arms. And we were coming across that harbor that time of the night. It was dark.
But you obviously made it all right.
Oh, we made it all right. And then we stayed aboard in Maryland. And then I had to work with the first sergeant because we had a lot of reports to make out for people who were missing. We had to get reports back from San Francisco, what happened in November, because all the stuff we'd mailed went down with the ship. So we had to redo it again.
How about your belongings? Did most of them go down with the ship?
We lost them all, except what we had on.
Just the clothes on your back is all you
I had
came
a pair
away
of
with?
trousers, yeah, and a skivvy shirt, shoes and socks, and I kept them on. They dried on my feet, and the clothes just dried on.
Do you have anything left as a memento of that day? Anything that you came off the ship with?
Well, I have my dog tags at home, and I think I just got rid of the trousers not too long, because my mother passed away, and when I was up there cleaning out all that stuff, I said, oh, I don't want to keep all that stuff anymore, and I threw it out, because it was something to take care of all the time.
How much time did you spend here before you left the islands, after the attack?
Oh, I spent till September of '43. So I was here during the Battle of Midway, and
What was your assignment during that period of time?
well, up until the 20th of October 1942, we were known as the Marine Detachment, U.S.S. Oklahoma. And after that, they made us a casual company with some other Marines that came up from the Coral Sea battle. We were the first guard unit to move out to the Naval Supply Depot out of Pearl City. They had, what, 3 warehouses and a place. I don't know what it's like out there now. I've never. And that was our duties until they decided to move us back in the Marine Barracks.
What was martial law like for you? How did it affect your life?
Well, we were, martial law didn't, there wasn't too much martial law affecting us, because we were restricted as far as liberty hours and everything else. Because I was only a POC and corporal, well, then until we got ranked, that's the only time we got away from it.
Yeah. What did you do after 43? What
Well,
happened to you the rest of the war?
43, I moved back to Pendleton. I was sent back to Pendleton.
That's California.
In Pendleton, California. I stayed there until October 46. And I left there and went up to San Francisco for a year and then back out here again.
So when did you finally get out of the Marines?
I retired from the 1st Division on October the 31st, 1960, after 20 years service.
What is the most vivid thing in your mind, vivid memory of the day of the attack?
Well, you know, everybody asks me why didn't I talk much about it. I guess the reason I didn't talk too much about it, because I had to list those names on reports that we were listening. And we continued to get a letter from one of them's mother all the time. She couldn't believe it, you know. And if you're working on it like that for a while, you just say, I got to get rid of this stuff. And I didn't even bother with the Pearl Harbor survivors for years, because I just didn't want to be reminded that those 13 people went down, and I had to keep listing their names as being missing in action. It's not that if you can walk away and leave it.
Today, if you hear someone say, or you read the words Pearl Harbor or December 7th, what's the first picture that comes into your mind?
First picture comes to my mind, me getting off of that ship. And one thing, because That was one. Everybody was looking out for their own life at the time, because you're not. It's just. It'd be foolish if you said you weren't looking out for somebody else. You're going out there to save yourself and help other people once you get a chance. But we didn't have any chance because our ship was going over, and we had to find out a way ourselves.
Do you ever dream about that day?
Oh yes, there's been times lately, more since I've been with Pearl Harbor survivors than there was before, because they keep reminding us, you know, of it. Well, then I finally been working out of it.
What kind of dreams?
Oh, well, I was dreaming of the ship going over, and just how lucky I was to get off, because here I'd gone from second to the third deck and then back up on top side, and missed everything, and was able to get over the side, and then being pushed underwater 5 times in winter. It's the only thing, I guess, if I hadn't kept my head then, I don't know what would have happened.
Does the dream always follow reality? Okay. Sorry, I'm talking. I'm getting a lot more long-winded.
It's 10 feet above the water.
Okay, yeah, try not to use any naval terms that somebody might not understand. 110 feet, your battle station was 110 feet above the water line?
Just about.
Oh, tell us that. Ready? Let's go back to the Oklahoma. You're aboard. Where was your battle station?
It was up secondary control aft on the mainmast. That was for the control of the broadside battery. I was on a 7 and 9 gun sight setter, and whatever on the controls up there.
That's quite high above the water, isn't it?
Oh, it was about 108, 10 feet up.
That's quite a drop.
It'd be quite a drop if you went down, yes.
You never managed to get to your battle station.
Well, no, we never managed because it was locked when we had to go up there. Because we were getting ready for A and I inspection the next day.
A and I.
Yeah, that's what the Navy term for their, I don't know what they get down for, but it's an A and I inspection. And then admirals come aboard and inspect your ship and everything else. So they had locked it up. They'd taken all the 50s down from up top side also.
50 caliber machine guns.
Yeah, they're in a bathtub, what we call a bathtub.
What was the relationship of the Marines to the Navy men aboard these battleships?
Well, what I had with them, I had never had no trouble. I'd get in a little arguments, but I mean, there was nothing real strong, because you had to live very close all the time.
Did you get to know a lot of these sailors?
Well, I didn't get around to knowing too many, because working all the time around our own duties, why, and then it just didn't. We know what we knew. We might have known some of the cooks or the mess cooks or something like that, and some of the guys got in the brig quite a bit.
So you knew mostly the Marines in your detachment, and I understand you also knew a lot of the Marines aboard the Arizona.
I knew a few of them, yes. There was some of them had gone through training at the same time I had it at San Diego, at the recruit depot. We'd all gone to training together. And that's how I knew them, too.
Anybody in particular that you remember from the Arizona?
I could look at the name on them. If I went out there and look at them, I can tell, but I can't remember calling right offhand, because it's been many years.
When you were forced off the Oklahoma and looked back, the ship had capsized at that point. Describe the scene for us.
Well, I was in the water, and then when I swam back to it, it was way over like this. The bottom was, and I said, "Oh, what is this?" Here it is. The bottom's up now, because we knew what was happening, and so I just swam over and hung on to it. It just the way it was, because.
Must have been unbelievable that this had happened.
We went through, when we were going through school, they said a battleship was unsinkable, but this wasn't true at that time. Not when you took that many torpedoes and every door was open for the water to go flooded. The only part that didn't get flooded was our landing force storeroom, and all our gear down there was dry because when they cut through the bottom, they brought it to us. It was all good shape.
For lack of a better word, do you hold any animosity, hard feelings against Japan or the Japanese because of that day and what you went through?
Well, that's hard something to speak on. You know, what are you going to say? At that time, you'd do most anything done. Now you just think, well, we won over them, but I don't have to hold my hand out to a lot of them there. But no, I'll be friendly when they come on and talk it in, but I'm not going to go out of the way for a lot of things.
So, for example, if you ran into some Japanese survivors of World War II or of the Pearl Harbor attack, you wouldn't go out of your way to talk to them? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'd probably go and talk to them, but I mean, it's not one of the things that I'm going to go out and make a special trip for, because I think it was misled and we got into it, and why did they have to do it, and the way things are going.
A last question. You played a part in a very important event in our history. Has that affected your life in any way?
Well, not too much I can think of right now. It's I've always just been taking things as they come, and whether it affected, I don't know, but right now it's keeping me busy because I am the state chairman for the California Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, and I'm busy right there. Another little incident I'd like to tell you about. This fellow, he was our cook on board ship named Lucy, and I've always tried to keep up with him. While I later found out he was killed going into Tawara with a tank battalion. And right now, I cannot find another Oklahoma Marine hardly that was on board at the time of the attack. They may have been killed in other action or they've passed on, because I know one of them fellow passed away in Seattle just a year ago from cancer. He was the only. So as far as I know, there's not too many Marines left.
I'm talking to the sole survivor from the Marine
I don't know yet.
detachment?
I'd have to go way back because I haven't found any at these conventions or anything.
How many of you were there?
There were 67 of us that survived the attack. I think that's what it was. I'm trying to remember.
Are you, I said I'd ask one last question, but one more. You give me the impression that you'd rather not think about December 7th.
Well, a lot of people are probably more gung-ho about this than I am. It's something that I would just rather let kind of lie a little bit and not make it too gung. I'm not as gung-ho, but I'll be in there saying what I think of Pearl Harbor, and I'll help everything is, but I don't go out and do a lot of these fellows. They get so gung-ho that it is, you know how some people get gung-ho about things. Well, I can just go along and make it just, well, that was an event in my life of that day. Let's let it rest for a while. But I can talk about it later on. But I'm just not going to be so big gung-ho about it, and I'm not going to come out. Because after 20 years in the military, I don't feel that I should have to feel like being a military person when I go someplace anymore. Because I spent 20 years in the most rigid outfit there is. And I don't see why that I have to be so military outfit when I go to something like this. But I enjoy it. Anyway.